Hey everyone, my name is Alex Bushell and I'm here with LearnGlazing.com, and I have Stewart with me today from JEI Structural Engineering, and we're going to have a pretty fun conversation about delegated design. I know there's a lot of misconceptions or misunderstandings as to what that means. I know that I wasn't super clear on it either, so Stewart here is going to fill me in. But before we dive into all of that, let's talk about you, Stewart, first. So let's give it a little background on who you are and how you got into all of this.
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, it was an answered prayer, essentially, for me to get into this. Back around the 2000 timeframe, I was doing some really deep heart searching, and according to what did I want to do? How did I see myself, serving people and helping people out, in the world? And so I did some deep praying about it, and it was, I'll be doggone, it was about a week and I had an answered prayer. Our first client in the glass and glazing industry gave us a call out of the blue, and it was just me at that time, and I didn't even have a shingle out there. Really, I think all that was out there was just a uh, engineering, thing that about structural engineering. So they gave me a call, and that was our very first client. We still serve them today. And he asked, "Do you do anything associated with structural engineering of aluminum?"
Okay.
And he said he had an odd specification that said that they needed to have the requirement fulfilled of calculations associated with aluminum and the glass system for a curtain wall. And I said, "Well, actually, I do have some background in aluminum design, and I did from a major engineering firm that I had served for about 8 years prior to going out on my own." And so I said, "Yes, I'll look at it and take a gander at it and see what I can do." And from that point on, I knew that that was the answer. That's an area that I really wanted to serve people in, and it just grew from there. It was, and also, how can you not resist the beauty of glass? That's the thing. You can actually see the reward for your work right there. It's beautiful, and it's everywhere.
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, obviously, I'm in love with the side of glass too. It's what you see at the end of the day in the building, right? Everything is covered. All those hard work from all the other engineers and all the other trades gets kind of put inside of the box, and then we get to come out there and put the pretty side on it. But so, if I'm understanding this correctly, so you were already an engineer, you were already working on some structural stuff, and then out of nowhere, just a glazing customer kind of reached out to you, and that's what started you off.
Yeah, yeah. I was a structural engineer. I'd been a structural engineer probably for about 8 years. Yeah, about 9 years prior to that, 2 years out on my own. And I was just kind of struggling for contract work, did a lot of deep soul searching and praying, and it was an answered prayer. Yeah, yeah, out of
So,
the blue.
so that puts you now at like close to 24, 25 years with the glazing industry.
About 23,
Okay.
the way that I figured, maybe 23, 24. Yeah, in that time frame.
That's awesome. So, obviously, we appreciate it because there's not a lot of engineers that focus on this side. But what I did want to say is I've been to a lot of conventions. You've been to the same ones. I see you there. You do the presentations and kind of like the reason we're here today, right? We wanted to talk about delegated
Yeah.
design. We have a new course coming out on our website about a lot of the structural movement and stuff like that. And in that, we talk a little bit about delegated design, or at least it's a really important subject when people deal with engineers like yourself. And it's like I said before, it's a little bit misunderstood. At least even I had some questions about it when I first reached out to you. So if you can kind of dive down that road a little bit for me and just tell us that, just clear it up. What is delegated design?
Yeah, delegated design appears in the specification or the contract documents that are associated with almost all of the contract documents that come through for glass and glazing systems.
And
And
who puts
so
it
you'll
there?
see it down there. It says delegated design by a professional engineer licensed in the state where the construction is. And so what that means is the architects and structural engineers that originally designed the full building figured out that they were not the experts at facade systems a long time ago, back before 2000. And so they started entering this into the contract documents that all the architects had for delegated design of the facade system. as a structural engineering component. So it means that the structural engineer of record that designed the building structure actually delegates down through the contract to the general contractor, down to the glazing contractor, and ultimately that gets delegated out to a facade specialty structural engineer like myself or JEI Structural. Yeah.
So you in your company now, you have a full team, and this is what you do. JEI Structural Engineering does delegated design for.
Yes, we're about up to 18 people, and that's exactly what we do. We do actually do work besides glazing systems now. We also focus on all kinds of facade systems, panel systems, terracotta, uh, just A to Z in any type of facade design. We really don't get into like brick and stuff like that, and that's not very beautiful anyway. So
Yeah,
it's the glass and the metal that's making things beautiful out there. Yeah.
of course. So that's really interesting. So it's now in, would you say, a majority of the projects, and about half of the projects, and almost every project? How often are you seeing this request from the architects and so on?
It's 100% of the time now that we see that in the specifications. It will, even on a small little storefront project, we'll see delegated design required by a professional engineer. Now, what happens is there's a little game that goes on, and we don't, fault anybody for doing that, but ultimately, there's a risk that the glazing contractor takes. They get the shop drawings done first, they submit it up through the general contractor to the architect, and if it is requested that calculation package be done, that's a lot of the times whenever they choose to get the engineering done for the delegated design. Why is that a risk? Because everything can change.
Oh, yeah.
And ultimately, the engineering can really, it can have a huge impact in the actual design of the facade system. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I deal with MP drafting quite closely, because Marcus owns both, and I get to see a lot of times where even they have to make just changes based on the systems that obviously they understand, right? And if you're
Yeah.
dealing with different manufacturers, there are going to be different capabilities and different things that they can do, and based on those different understandings, the changes can happen at any time. They can happen from somebody messing up the steel, or somebody putting the concrete slightly off, or somebody putting the opening slightly off, all the way to the system is a different system than what they can get availability wise. When people are coming to you, are you towards the end of the process then, or are you right at the beginning? Are you helping and aiding and trying to come up and with the systems calculations, and then do you have to then re-review your projects? I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly when your involvement is.
Yeah, so that's such a good question, because we would like to be more at the beginning of the process. In fact, we've got efforts underway to be, even up at the stage where the architect is, starting the design for the facade system. And so the sooner that we're involved, the better off we are in the project to be able to ferret out any types of things that might, mess a glazing contractor up, and them not order the right material, or changes along the way, unforeseen, things that are in the engineering calculations that we can get straightened out at the very front. That's really our best work, and that's the way that we like to serve clients, because if we're able to do that at the very beginning, it's a much smoother process all the way through it. We just have a little bit of engineering up front to kind of make sure that we're going in the right direction, and then we save the remainder of the engineering for a little bit later on, whenever the architect approves the drawings and the dimensions and stuff like that. That's the best process. Yeah.
So I have been involved in a few projects like that. We used to call it the design assist, where we would visit with the sales reps and engineers and so on, and try and get a lot of our stuff troubleshot right at the beginning of the project. Usually in turn, it was beneficial to us, because we would be spec'd, we would be in the project, we would kind of be able to land at things. So we were offered this upfront help to be able to get the project. Are you guys doing that then? Are you focusing on trying to put the word out, call me, talk to me? I would love to look at this. Obviously, at the end, I'm going to continue to work on this. Is that like a push you guys have? Do people even know you're doing that?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that's the push. Do they know we're doing that? We try to make it known that we have that option available. And through our, kind of partnering with MP Drafting in a lot of ways, we're trying to integrate the process of the shop drawings and the engineering so that it fits together very well into a synchronized event for the glazing contractor that flows along smoothly, and it can also condense the schedule. So there's a lot of favors in doing the design assist. So that's exactly what we want to get out there. It's a really, really good way of handling a project and conquering it.
So the partnership
There's
is basically simultaneous. You guys are both working, you're talking to each other, you're showing it to each other, so it can get done almost like a one-stop shop in-house per se
yeah,
kind of situation.
not only that, but we're communicating with the glazing contractor, their needs along the way, and potentially up to the structural engineer and architect to find out, if there's some missing information. We can handle all that together and make it a seamless project. Yep.
That's awesome. So you would ideal project, and correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you would love architect has an idea, he gives you a call, right? You guys start talking about it. He puts in he starts designing what he wants. You guys are reviewing it with him. That makes it over to shop drawing eventually after bid through a glazier. Once it actually turns into a project, you're still involved helping the process. Now you're dealing with MP drafting to get those shop drawings up to par, making sure everything's still good. Project seamless out the door. And what are we avoiding? Are we avoiding a lot of revisions, RFIs? What's the end goal here?
Yeah, so we're avoiding some mishaps in the project process as it goes along and develops. In other words, we've seen time after time, ultimately there's a shop drawing set, that goes up to the architect, gets back down to the shop drawing provider, ultimately comes down to the engineer, and then something does not pan out engineering wise, and we have to tell somebody that something doesn't work as it's indicated in the drawings. That's
Yeah.
the worst, and we
Oh
don't
yeah,
like
nothing
that,
like
to
somebody
give
that
that.
window's too big.
Oh,
Yeah, and then they don't like the new divisions. That's awful. I've seen that
but
before where we have to be smaller and yeah.
but it's even worse than that. We get some clients in that say, "Oh, it's already installed."
Oh my God.
That's that is really, really hard. And we do our best to help clients out like that, to be able to kind of backward verify and help, the engineering match what is in the actual construction. But sometimes there's some hard messages that we have to deliver because it does not meet the code requirements. And so we're trying to make sure that everything meets the code requirements up front, and it smooth out that process along the way. In addition to that, I will say that we've had a lot of projects where we've actually saved in the process. In other words, the client has had too much steel in wrong places, and we're able to cut back and save a lot of money out of the project. And sometimes we've been able to say, hey, you can really use this other system over here instead of this curtain wall system. And that can save you a lot of money too. So there's savings in it.
Oh, that's awesome. So you and I spoke a little bit off camera a different day, and I guess the way that I was able to describe it, and you confirmed that it's correct, is you guys are specialized. This is what you do. This is your world. There's an engineer on record who's going to be, reviewing the entirety of the building, but then he needs to kind of sublet some of these little things that, they know some knowledge on, but they can't focus on, especially as specific or as, I guess, in depth as you guys do. And the
Yeah.
analogy that I made is that you guys are like a specialty doctor. Like, just to put it on layman's terms for all of us, somebody sends you and refers you to somebody else. That's you guys. You guys come in here, the ins and outs of these systems. This is your bread and butter is glazing systems. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So facade design is actually considered technically to be a specialty structural engineering type of a field. And so we are specialty structural engineers. It's interesting to note what you said was that there's the structural engineer that is up there that is responsible for the building structure. And ultimately in the process, they decided, back before, 2000 timeframe, that they're not really technically savvy in the area of facades, and so they started delegating that out. It used to go to the facade manufacturers, and so
Oh,
the facade manufacturers used to do all of the design process for glazing facades, and slowly that got out of their hands and required a lot more engineering. The manufacturers did not want to be responsibility for the liability associated with the engineering design. They wanted to be manufacturers.
yeah.
Does that make sense? And
No,
so,
yeah.
yeah, what I kind of bring into the mix is a very unique item. We bring in to the mix my experience as a structural engineer of record, designing steel structures. That was my background. And we bring that into the facade design, the glass and glazing systems and facade design specialty area. A lot of facade design specialists or glazing system specialists and engineers that come out of the manufacturing side. But here's the thing. There was a big misunderstanding associated with that because they didn't have the experience to understand building structural movement. Like a building structural engineer understands their own building structure that they design, that's where there was a disconnect. And so
Yeah.
whenever we talk about, kind of the transition, from the manufacturer's responsibility into a delegated design specialty structural engineer, it's better to get an engineer on board that has an understanding of how the building structure integrates with the support of the facade system and where it's supposed to be supported at.
That's really cool. So they're getting the double whammy because you've been on both sides of the fence and you can really combine both of those. It's almost like they got the double
Yeah,
engineer in the same head there. Yeah.
yeah. We really kind of originated the message that was out there probably since the early 2000s that, hey, building structural movement, the movement of the building structure relative to the facade system is such a critical part of the design. You really have to understand the building structure movement and the facade and how it relates to that movement.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that we tried to do in that course that we're focusing on because it seems to be I'm hearing more about it. Maybe because I'm also paying more attention to it, but I'm hearing it everywhere. Everybody's talking about like, hey, concrete moves, steel moves, wood moves.
Yeah,
Guess what? The glass and the framing for the glass moves, and the glass doesn't exactly expand and contract at the same rate that a lot of these other materials can move or shift, and it can't in some cases. So when people like you guys come in just to be like, okay, hold on, is that glass going to be able to set a little further into that system or a little bit over to the side? And when the whole thing starts to shift or want to rack back and forth, it's a really, really interesting subject matter that's just, I'm glad that there are specialty situations like this. So are there a lot of engineering firms like you guys? Because this is, I mean, it seems to be, I know it's a concern and you're saying that as early as the 2000s, but I don't hear a lot of other people talking about it as much as you guys do.
well, we kind of brought the mantra, to the table, in that area because I did have a special understanding as a structural engineer of record. Whenever I was designing steel buildings and concrete buildings, I had no clue to the limitations associated with the manufactured, curtain wall systems or
Yeah.
storefront systems. I just didn't know. Most structural engineers out there that are designing these buildings, the structural building, they have no idea what the limitations are associated with the manufacturing of the facade systems. And that's a real disconnect. And it has to be, there needs to be more information out there trying to, punch through that barrier and getting it right.
So a big question that obviously I get asked a lot, why JEI or why any other engineer out there? And it feels like you've answered that question here in 7 different ways. You have the background in both. You have it in there. You've known it. You've done it both. It sounds
Yeah.
like not every engineer has both sides. But if I were to ask you just quickly to say, what is the value that JEI is bringing to the table that you would say is above the rest? What would that be?
Yeah. Interesting that you asked that because a few years ago, we kind of sat down as a leadership group in JEI, and we started trying to figure out what identifies us, what makes us different than a lot of the other specialty structural engineering firms out there that do the same thing. And a big item that came up along the way is communication. We're about communicating with our clients and keeping that communication going through the process, because ultimately what we heard out there, which is really bad for the specialty structural engineering business, is that clients would get a packet, they'd say, hey, I need engineering calculations done. And then they'd get something back, and and it'd be like no communication along the way. Well, this isn't what I wanted. I didn't want to have these anchors. I didn't, why do we have all this, steel and stuff like that? So there's a lack of communication in the industry. What sets us apart is we communicate. We train our engineers to communicate from the very beginning. Another big key difference is we really, really, really want to be a blessing to the clients that we serve. That is a tagline that we've taught all of our engineers. How can we be a blessing to the people that we serve? So that's a mindset that we carry that's a little bit different than the industry. Yeah.
Well, for me to understand that, and I like to repeat things in my own words to make sure I understand things. What you're doing is when you're talking to your client as you're engineering, you're trying to keep in mind where they would like to have anchors, what's most beneficial to the system based on how they're going to finish it or what they can install and so on. Like you're trying to give them options. You're kind of like really kind of design this thing based around, obviously what's structurally sound and safe, but also what they cannot do or what they might like. So that's where that communication comes in. You're not just sending them a blind
Absolutely.
no surprises. It's like, hey, let's talk about it. What works for you? What works for us?
Yeah. So attention is another item. And it is a principle of what we, stand for at JEI. Attention not to our own details of the day that we're interested in. Attention to the details that are important to the client. So that is another principle that we have up on the wall. We've got several of those principles. The first one I mentioned was communication. Attention to the detail that the clients are interested in is another principle.
That's really cool. So I do have another question for you, and this is something that's asked pretty often. There's a big pricing difference between different engineering firms, right? And we hear that back and forth all the time. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay, so sometimes you're basically asking a question. Okay, why does XYZ engineer cost so many thousand less than another engineer? So I would turn it around and say, since you've seen a lot of the drafting side of business too, I have seen a great variance in prices with drafting quotes for shop drawings. And I put it like this: you can readily see differences in the shop drawings and the shop drawing providers and the differences in level of quality.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it. I've seen some really horrible shop drawings, and I've seen some really, really great shop drawings with level of detail and the care that is put into it. Now imagine you can't really see, there's not a level of being able to observe differences in engineering calculations. You just really can't see a lot of it. It would take an engineer to be able to look at it, a calculation package, and figure out what the differences are. But there are huge differences in the way engineers go about caring for the client. In other words, it's also a level of service type of an issue too. So one engineer may be looking at it, okay, this really is going to require a lot of communication, a lot of steps along the way to be able to, help the client out in these areas. So it's a level of service type of an aspect that they're thinking about. In addition to that, I will say it's an estimate. So there's no fixed points in, how engineers are looking at different things. One engineer might say, oh, golly, look at this corner over here. This is really going to be a challenge. Another engineer might be looking at a different spot and saying, well, this is going to be an easy deal, So it's really just an estimate. There's no real, given fixity for, engineering quotes. Kind of the same way with shop drawings.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you get what you pay for, right? That's always been the case in this world, at
Absolutely.
least.
Yeah.
Stuart, this is awesome. So I guess I only have one final question for you. You know that our training over here is mostly meant for new employees, either project managers, sales, engineers, even architects that take our training that just want to learn about the glass and glazing industry. And the one question that I get asked, or I like to ask, as well as much as I get asked, is what advice would you have for anybody new that is unaware of what you do? What kind of like, do you have like a tip or anything that you would like to recommend that people um, do entering this industry for this?
So you're talking about like new project managers that,
Sure.
get
Yeah.
into the glass and glazing business and stuff like that. Yeah. So, you know what? I think probably the biggest tip that I would give them would be information. Information is key to your success. And so go out, man, gather all the information that you can, like learn glazing. You're in that area of information about the good and the bad, and so gather all of that information. It will create your success. That's the main thing that I would recommend. The secondary thing that I would recommend is make sure that your heart is about being a blessing to the people that you serve, because we all serve somebody. We all serve somebody. And so
Yeah.
if you're a blessing, if you're focused on being a blessing to them, things will work itself out. People will be able to see that. Yeah.
Stuart, thank you. This was really cool. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'd like to do some more if you don't mind, but I think
Absolutely.
that's all I had for today, because I don't want to break some of the other conversations I want to have with you. I definitely want to talk about structural movement and so on in some other ways too. But I appreciate today. If you have anything else to say or anything like that, I'll be putting your link in the website here or in the video. But if you want to tell us what it is.
Yeah, www.jeistructural.com. That's
Okay,
our
perfect. And I'll put a
website.
link to it
Yeah, right
in
on
the
top.
video as well. So
Yeah, and thank you so much. A shout out to Alex, you and Learn Glazing. You guys are awesome. You're doing the right stuff. Thank you.
yeah, we're trying. Thank you. And thank you for supporting and helping us do that too. So
Thanks again. Bye.